am Karen Osborne. I'm the author of The Memory War duology from Tor, right back there. Best looking books in for, ever. And I am a short fiction writer, and I have spent many, many years writing short fiction and reading short fiction and loving short fiction. I went to Clarion. I am a full-on believer in the power and and the might and the energy of short fiction. So we're going to talk about um, why it's important, what's happening at the end of COVID, the good stuff and the bad stuff. So let's get started. I would like everyone to introduce themselves. Tell the audience who you are, what you do, and maybe one fun fact about your magazine or your career. Let's start with Neil. Sorry, I'm gonna call. I was like, do I have to call it names?
I'm gonna go first. This is a bunch of editors. You have to tell us.
Would you like me to call names, or would you like to just jump in? I should have asked that way before this. I'm sorry.
Well, at least for introductions, we need an order.
Okay, so let's start with Neil, and then Dave, and then Scott.
All right. Well, thank you very much. My name is Neil Clark. I'm the publisher and editor of Clark's World Magazine, Forever Magazine, the Best Science Fiction of the Year series, and I am a 10-time nominee for Hugo Award for Best Editor Short Form. 10 this week. You're muted.
You're muted.
Muted.
No. See if I can do anything here. You seem to be unmuted to me.
It looks like you're, do you have a little mic that might have a button on it that needs clicked on?
Yeah, right at the bottom of the screen, there's mute, stop video, share, record. And if it's not green.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll introduce myself while Dave tries to figure this out, and hopefully he can jump in right when I'm done. Hopefully Dave joins us, because I defer to Dave and Neil as the real experts in this. What I bring to it is a sort of an outsider's perspective, because we started Dreamforge Magazine. I'm the editor and publisher of Dreamforge Anvil and Dreamforge Magazine, Dreamforge Anvil being our online component and Dreamforge Magazine being our print component. And I started that with my wife in 2019, and we have no prior experience in publishing at all. So this is something that we jumped into. Our day job is web development and marketing, and we bring some of that knowledge, expertise, and sort of a perspective to it, which is probably different than Neil's and Dave. So that's what I hope to get across. But how we doing, Dave?
Yeah, cool. Sorry, I think my mic was trying to use my webcam as a microphone, which it's a camera. Can't do that. Sorry. My name is Dave Ring. I'm the editor and publisher of Neon Hemlock Press and the co-editor of Baffling Magazine. And so that's a flash fiction magazine. And aside from that, my editing experience is mostly in anthologies. And I'm deer in headlights with the fun fact still. I'll work on it though.
Okay. Well, yeah, feel free to tell us when everything's, I think it's good to go. Let's start with a good question. It's easy to get negative about publishing these days. If you've been on Twitter this week, it can feel like a morass of negative takes, especially in COVID when everything's been just so hard for literally everyone. So, tell me one thing in, what's happening in speculative fiction right now that makes you really excited about the future, like especially in short speculative fiction. Start with Scott. Sorry, I'm gonna call on you.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm just deferring to the experts here. But well, basically, I appreciate kind of the rise of what would be called hope punk and solar punk, and essentially fiction that's trying to take a look at the future and not see it as completely apocalyptic and dystopian. And that's kind of what Dreamforge is about, and that's what we're trying to do. So, and we're committed to that. We don't necessarily see that as, well, that has to take over the world of speculative fiction, or all fiction has to be like that. But we're just glad to see any of it. And anyone who, my experience with both science fiction readers and science fiction writers is amazingly, a lot of them really don't like the idea of the future. They don't want to see it happen, and they don't want to live there. And I'm a bit opposite that. I am have the Star Trek philosophy of the human adventure is just beginning. So that's what I like to see.
Dave?
Well, maybe I don't know. I've been pretty excited by ways that like hybrid work and new forms have been kind of working their way into recognition. Like there's a story that, if I'm not wrong, just got nominated for the Hugo short story that was like a Twitter fiction initially shared, like using like a really unusual form that like made me cry at my desk when I read it. So like there's been, and I think also the way narrative and interaction fiction have sort of been like showing up in the game has been really interesting and exciting and hopeful for me as well.
In my case, it's the increasing amount of international authors, and particularly works in translation. When at Clarksville, we've been doing it for, I think, 7 years now. But in recent years, we've seen other magazines start including it regularly. I think there's some of our Future SF, Galaxy's Edge is doing it now, and we're seeing even the occasional story in almost all the other markets. So that's a huge change in the last decade, and it seems to be moving, increasing in pace. That we're seeing more projects, not just anthologies, but in the magazines as well.
I noticed I know in the past year we've seen a rise in like hyper focused magazines such as Mermaids Monthly, The Deadlands, Windgraph, some of these new ones that are coming out with really particular things like cozy. I mean, I think there's like 3 cozy fiction outlets opening just like these past couple of months. What do you think? What do you think all of that is going to bring to the field in general and to your work?
That's a good question. I can say pass. I think so. It's interesting, right? Because I think baffling sometimes has been like accused is a strong word, but like described as an ultra niche publication. But like the breadth of the work that we've seen hasn't felt that way for me in the editor's seat. So I wonder if part of the some of that focus like gives people a chance to not just do the high notes and the low notes of a particular theme, and lets you like really explore the full range of it. And just I think it lets people just like really nerd out with what they're into. Like Mermaids Monthly is like it's such a really great example of that, and the wide variety of interpretations of the theme and like riffs off of it have just been like really cool to read over the past year.
At the same time, I'm kind of concerned about these projects. As you mentioned, Mermaids Monthly, it's gone now. Um, they have a smaller scope, which gets them a smaller audience, and that makes, it's a challenge even as a general publication in science fiction and fantasy to get the number of subscribers you need to or supporters you need to keep your magazine going. Um, you know, in we historically, though, we've seen lots of this as theme anthologies. So this is just sort of a creep in and into the magazine sphere, and it's good because it brings in more people. Uh, uh, at the same time, I hope we can find ways to keep these more focused efforts alive.
I'll pick up on something Neil was talking about there with the idea of how do you keep these things going financially and how do you make them work and be sustainable. Um, like I said, we came into this as my wife and I as complete outsiders to publishing, but we have business experience and we have marketing experience, and we had a little bit of hubris based on that. Basically, how hard could this be? And what we found is that, for instance, one of the interesting things was just how much it can be expensive in terms of advertising, whether it's Twitter or Google or Facebook or whatever. And if you're trying to actually bring in an audience, if we were basically working with one of our day job customers and we kind of saw the ROI, return on investment, that we saw for magazines, we would have basically said stop advertising, because basically you're selling a $30 product and it's costing you $29.99 to get a customer, and you can't do that. It's not sustainable. So that's a longer story, but that turned us around to trying to work with building community rather than trying to go out and advertise, market in customers. But so that the financial challenge of basically getting into the market and getting seen is enormous. And the other main thing, just to touch on, was we saw that the number of people who were willing to submit stories to us, who had an interest in basically being authors, basically was much higher than the number of people who are interested in actually being a supporter or a reader, to the point where if you just flip those, we'd be financially secure and it would be fine. If everybody who was an author submitting to us was actually a subscriber, it'd be great. That sort of thing. But so those are the two factors that we saw just kind of getting into the field.
I think there's something I'd like to jump off of your point there is that there's a lot of criticism of short SF, particularly magazines, saying, oh, it's only the authors that keep them alive. And that's not true. From my own numbers, I can say that, yeah, there's authors among our subscribers, but the great majority of them aren't authors. And it's reaching that community and getting that community to support you. That's the real challenge. And kind of interestingly, I don't come from publishing either. My prior career was technology and in education. So I think that a lot of the people in short fiction are coming at things from a background that's not quite traditional, and that helps us adjust in a way that the rest of the industry hasn't been able to.
Well, and just real quick, the idea of community then is really what we pivoted to. So where we started into this basically with the same mentality as if we were selling widgets, it's like, how do you go out and market to that group and get them in? We basically found we needed to pivot to know, how do you talk to your community and how do you build interest in a community, and that's what we're doing now, and that starts with our authors. We've we get a lot of Patreon support from a group we call Dreamcasters, who basically a lot of them are beginning to intermediate writers, and they're supporting us and working with us to learn how to write stories better. And then we take that community attitude out and try to grow slowly, as you would in networking in a business.
So let's give you a really, really big, wide question to chew on. Right now, I was about to ask you some of the challenges, but let's start with something a little wider. Well, not start, but continue. What is the state of short fiction right now? In the shortest answer possible, what do you think is happening right now? What is the state of it? Because I think in the next question we're going to move to some of the more challenges you've been facing, but to get there we need to put a name to it.
Well, I think I was going to say, as far as, again, what we see is interest from writers who are interested in writing and creating and being imaginative and coming up with new worlds and new approaches and learning the craft. Very strong, tremendous amount of interest there. I think there's probably a very big interest among readers as well. Like, there's a good market as well, but from the point of view of an editor trying to reach that market, I think the saturated might not be the right word, but basically it's a tough market to break into and basically get a share of readership out of. So that's my 2 cents.
I'd say it's very mixed. You have some really high points, like the variety of content that's available, and then you have some really low points, which is the fact that so many of the people working behind the scenes aren't paid, or are paid barely. I mean, SIF done a good job of encouraging a minimum rate, and admittedly that minimum rate should be higher, but No one's doing that for the rest of the staff. And as a result, um, it tends to be the first place cut to make these things work. And there's a very passionate community trying to keep these things going, and are self-sacrificing, falling on their own swords to make sure it keeps going, and that can only last so long. So it's one of those things where I say we got a beautiful house of cards. Um, you know, we the reason we keep losing markets that people like is this is that we don't have a good financial model. We have loads of people interested in short fiction right now, and if a quarter of them were supporting it, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We'd be talking about how wonderful everything is. Um, but yeah, and then we're the second piece to that is that we also undercharge when we do charge for things like look at everything that's published, books, audiobooks, trade paperback, hardcover, mass market paperback. All those prices in the last 10 years have gone up. Short fiction magazine subscription prices have stayed pretty flat. So we've been harming ourselves and being shortchanged on the other end. But like I said, there's a lot of really good things going on, and the trick right now is how do you solve that problem without ruining that gem you've got?
I mean, as far as like financial ingenuity or like troubleshooting, because it definitely feels like something that not a lot of folks have figured out in a way that works for readers, writers, editors. Like we've had some success with crowdfunding, and then with baffling in particular, like the goal has always been to grow it only at the rate of the Patreon that we have associated with it. So like right now, all the money from it goes to stories, and if more folks become patrons, we'll buy more stories. But in the meantime, we're just going to keep going at the rate that we have now. There is still a little bit of sword falling happening because I'm not paying myself for that. But so maybe that's something I should prioritize as a goal before adding more stories. It's also it's kind of giddy. You get that giddy feeling when you can publish more stuff though, and it's hard to not keep pursuing that feeling of like I want to share more work with people.
Took a heart attack for me to wake up.
Well, we are glad you are still with us.
I'm happy to still be here, but
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's hard sometimes because we all love it so much, right? I mean, writers, authors, it's and it's I remember when I started getting into writing short fiction, people were like, "Oh, that's not where the money is," and I would be like, "But it's fun." So, I mean, I think, Dave, you talked a little bit about some of the challenges we've started facing in like for example, wanting to build and wanting to publish more, but only being able to go at the rate of your Patreon. And I've noticed a lot of people are dealing with the new normal and stuff that happened over the past 2 years. So what are some of the challenges that you've maybe just started facing in the past 2 years, COVID wise, the way things are changing? And what sort of challenges do you think might be coming that you might be seeing on the horizon too, maybe coming this year? And this is and this can be both as an editor and as someone who works with writers, maybe for writers too.
I wish I knew the answer to that. I think part of it is also like so as a publisher, like the first books that we put out came out in April 2020. So like this has like also been the only world that we've known here. So part of it is, what will it look like if we ever actually can show up and be a vendor at conventions or so some of those things like I haven't even really gotten to explore, and I've gotten into a good groove with some things like online events and things like that, but it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to actually learn how to pivot those to in-person spaces. Yeah, but I don't have the forethought really to answer what problems are coming. Except maybe like, I don't know, some of the things I think people have done a better job with some accessibility issues. And then it's like, how do we not lose the advances and accessibility efforts that organizations have made as we go back to in person, so those people don't just feel left behind like yet again. That's something I think about.
Well, go ahead, Neil.
No, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say what challenges in the last 2 years. Well, the whole COVID thing when it first started, like we were just getting started, so we were just getting our feet planted when COVID hit toward the end of 2019 into 2020, and it pretty much nearly took us out because for one thing, we have a day job, we have a regular business, and COVID nearly took that out, which not only took a lot of our time and attention away, but also we're ourselves subsidizing some of this. So that took away money that we had to put toward Dreamforge. And on top of all that, things like the post office forgot how to deliver things. So we had an entire issue toward the end of, I think it was the one toward the end of 2019 that went out and it didn't get to anybody. And it was actually held up in the mail for months. And we were replacing copies for people and, spending a lot there. And it's like, what happened to our you know, and that might be getting a little better, but we actually turned from not printing our own magazines to basically going with Amazon Kindle print on demand. And this year we're going to do a Kickstarter. In about a month, we're going to try to get back to print. But the whole COVID thing nearly was just a disaster all the way around for everything. As as far as what are the challenges moving ahead, we're still probably in that stage where we're just trying to stabilize and conserve our resources and still be here because obviously as all that stuff was happening, we had to make a decision. Well, do we still try to do this when there's so much else happening in our lives and our our regular business needs attention as well? And as you can see, our answer was, yeah, we kind of still want to hang in here. We do have a lot of fun with this. We have met a lot of people. One of the ways we look at this from our point of view, because we also love just in our regular business to have interns and to see them grow and to see our employees grow and move on to better things. And we've kind of come to get that relationship with, our writers and readers and people who support us as well. And we just want to continue to be here for them.
The big disruptions happened in 2020 when everything first started because you had all the lockdowns, you had people losing jobs, and if they were running a magazine, obviously it made it tougher to do things. And at the same time, you had people canceling subscriptions because they needed to save money because they couldn't work. On the flip side of that, you had people who were now not working who finally had the time to write that story they always wanted. So submissions went way up. We were seeing wild swings in submissions from month to month. We had a 500 or 600 difference between one month and the next. Yeah, we hit our record was I think close to 1,500 submissions in a month. And it's normally around 1,100. So 2020 was up and down like that. You had the print magazines, the like Asimov's and Analog, were lucky since they're bi-monthly. They only really had one issue that couldn't go to Barnes and Noble because Barnes and Noble canceled all magazine subscriptions. So those all got pulped. They sent out their copies to subscribers and pulped the rest because where are you going to warehouse that much stuff? And so 2021 though seems to stabilize a lot more. In our case, our subscriptions were U-shaped in 2020 and they have climbed in 21. And in talking with a number of other publications, that seems to be kind of the average. There's some that there was actually one that went up in 21 or in 20. But in the majority saw some declines or flat. The other thing that we were seeing was an increase in international subscriptions, and you could, or not subscriptions, submissions. You could almost track where COVID was hitting by the sudden increases in different areas of submissions coming in from there. So it was kind of interesting to be sitting back and horrifying at the same time. Where as far as where things are going, I really hope that some of the people that stepped into writing short fiction during the pandemic keep at it. If so, then we're going to have sort of in the next year or two, start seeing a wave of pandemic baby authors. Um, but um, it, I think the other thing that will probably happen in the next year, that price issue I told you about, a number of editors were talking about it. With people losing jobs and subscriptions going down, editors backed off the idea of changing their pricing. And I think that's probably going to change over the next 2 years.
Yeah, that was one of my questions that I have forth, but I want to piggyback on you, Neil, because I thought that was very important. I love the idea of pandemic baby authors, people who discovered their love for it while they were at home, and and go, well, maybe maybe they were like me and were like, maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll do it, for the first time. I have the time, let's go ahead and do it. So I'm thinking a lot of authors, and I'm going to piggyback also on A.L. Goldfuss's question here. Given the state of the world, do you expect a rise in cozier tastes? Are you less likely to purchase a bleak story, more likely? What kind of stories have you been seeing? Have there been like changes in that sort of thing? Are people being more adventurous or less adventurous in their submissions?
I would say, like, we just went through a reading period a month or so ago where we bought a lot of the stuff we're going to be using this year. And among the things that I saw and that I actually bought for whatever reason, a rise in sentiment. I don't want stories that are overly sentimental, but when you talk about cozy, things that basically have kind of a sweet emotion to them, bittersweet emotion to them, just basically something a little bit sentimental, thinking about kids, thinking about growing up. Not a lot, well, just based on who we are, but I saw a lot less. Oh, here's the horrible dystopian landscape that we have to slog across. So
I'm really awful at noticing my own trends of things that I like and respond to until sometimes there's like an issue out, and it's like, oh, an awful lot of those are about teeth, huh? That was weird. And then you know what it means if you dream about teeth,
I hate
maybe.
thinking about teeth.
But
I hate it. I hate it.
but the I guess I don't think I'm less likely to go for bleak things, but I'm also someone who like remembered how to read during the pandemic by reading Murderbot. So I'm not sure if there's a coziness to Murderbot despite the murdering, but um, I think sometimes it's like it's a fine line of is it nihilism or is it total like how pervasive is this bleakness? And maybe that's partly how I approach things. I am a sucker for like a scrap of resistance within a dark thing. So that's another way that I approach bleaker or less utopian work.
I would say that, in 2020, there was a clear theme. Everybody was writing pandemic stories. They made up a significant percentage of the pile. Um, but in 21, we didn't really see anything that was a dominant theme. I think we saw a lot of variety, which is great. That's what you want to see in a slush pile. You don't want to be flooded with a single type of story. It gets boring fast. The one thing that we did see in the last 2 years that has continued is an increase in the amount of piracy. We have to be a lot more vigilant in vetting anything we're about to purchase, because we're finding so much uh, in, uh, in the earlier stages, and that's just stuff we're noticing. We don't research every story that comes in, but sometimes it's pretty clear, and there's um, a tool that people have been using to AI rewrite previously published works, and I've become quite good at recognizing its writing style.
interesting. I just have to interrupt. Somebody tried to sell me flowers for Algernon this year. So
Yeah,
Oh,
I've had a series of them. Some of them are like I tweeted about one that was just like this. It was murdered. The story was just completely trapped. And so I put the before and after in tweets, and people were very confused how someone could think they could sell that. But these tools are becoming more sophisticated, and they're going to be a problem for us moving forward. So we're going to have to be a lot more vigilant. Um, um, as for cozy, I'm not really seeing it. I know that there's some markets that have opened up for, but I haven't really seen submissions to reflect it that it's any bigger or smaller than it was before.
Now I want to put that AI rewriter on my own stories and see if they can come up with better sentences.
No, they don't
I don't.
yet. I might have it write editorials for me though.
Gosh.
Well, there's there's one I went through with some of my own stories, and it's just it's just, oh my God, oh my God. No. Um, why, and I wanted to touch on, before we get to some more questions, I wanted to touch on some of why is a vibrant short fiction field so vital to the genre, like right now? And that's kind of a leading question. Like, I'm saying it's vital, right? But I think we all agree that, we're all here talking about short fiction. We all, short fiction is one of the most important things in our lives. So we all agree it's vital. But why right now is it especially something that we all need to support and work with and be with in whatever way we can?
Okay, I don't know if this will be flattering or not, but one of the ways I look at it is basically in life and evolution, you have the large animals, that can only evolve at a certain rate, and you have the bacteria that can evolve at a much higher rate and then influence how things evolve. So short stories are a little bit like that life form that can quickly multiply and quickly diversify and go off in all kinds of different directions. Whereas, I would say, novels and novel series and all that kind of stuff is, as Neil, I think, said earlier, it's the boat that can't turn very fast. So I think that one of the advantages, one of the nice things about short story fiction is that's where you'll see a lot of development and trying new different styles and talking about different things and new paths emerging from that. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's simply a vital piece of things.
It's definitely about the ecosystem itself. I mean, you have to invest a lot more money in a novel. So publishers of novels tend to be a lot more risk averse, whereas each of us can, publish 6 stories, and there's one in there that might be pushing things a little. That if we did a whole issue of just those stories, people might look at us funny. But because we've sandwiched one in there, they sort of they're okay with that, because no one expects to love every story in an anthology or an issue of a magazine. But it gives the editor that opportunity to push the boundaries a little bit, and you just don't find that as much with novel length work because of the investment that needs to go into that, and it's all the eggs in one basket at that one point. I think the one thing that's really during the pandemic that has come out is that people's attention span has been kind of disrupted by all the worry and anxiety of everything, and being able to focus on a short thing you can finish. And this appealed to me when my kids were little too. I mean, it's like being a parent. It's like, okay, they're napping. Okay, what can I do? That's relax. You can finish the story. You can get the satisfying punch out of it, and then they wake up and you start all over again. Whereas try that with a novel, you'll never finish.
That's a great point. I think you do occasionally run up against people who are expecting the feeling, delivery, and pacing of a novel and then get upset when they don't receive that in a shorter work, especially with novellas and novelettes, I've found. Where like the only criticism will be like, I wanted more or less, whatever. And it's like, sometimes the thing is what it is, and you have to recalibrate. But very much agree with the idea that the time investment is also sort of soothing with a short story. Like I think, I don't know, I have a really hard time getting my husband to watch anything that's longer than a TikTok video. And part of that is just like the commitment issue. Whereas like with shorter work, you don't have that same feeling necessarily. Sarah Gailey actually just put out an essay like today or yesterday in Uncanny that's literally about the like small pleasures of dedicating a little bit of time to a short story, and I think that can be really true for a lot of people.
And I just wanted to throw in another thing about short stories is one of the reasons kind of like why I'm doing short stories rather than trying to be a publisher of novels or something like that. And that's because as an editor, there is a great deal of satisfaction in looking over your collection of short stories and assembling them into something. It's like, oh, well, these all seem to go together with a theme, or these would be nice contrasts with one another, or so there's an emotional satisfaction to being an editor, I think, and working with the stories you've got to create an issue that you're proud of, which there's more diversity and more just creativity in it, I think, than just saying, well, I'm going to commit myself to working on this 100,000 word novel and that sort of thing. So that's kind of why we do what we do.
We've got
Great.
about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to yeah, sorry, Dave. I wanted to let everyone know that if you have a question to ask our panelists, the time is now. Put it in the chat. If you want to ask me directly, you can send me directly. So ask the chat and I'll ask it. I do want to finish up with a question that I'm going to ask now, but not ask you to finish it, because it's kind of something you have to think about a little. I want to maybe cogitate on a little bit, and that was the coolest thing you saw in the short fiction ecosystem this year. That you think is good to share with our 72 attendees. Like the coolest thing you were like, oh, that's cool, whether it was something you did or something you saw elsewhere, like a story, or like maybe it was, I like the way, this was crowdfunded, just like, I mean, and maybe not the coolest thing, but a cool thing. And so I think here we go. Well, while we're doing the questions, we have a question that what was your takeaway from the collapse of Silver Shamrock?
I don't know that there was much to take away. It seemed inevitable. I mean, just the way it was playing out, it didn't seem like it was going to end well at all.
Yeah, I think the most of it I've seen at this point has been like what has been the experience of the writers who've had books with them, and as they like navigate where to find homes for them, and how do you like justify or decide for yourself if you want to be part of an organization that is doing or saying things that you don't feel good about, and then we ended up where we are.
I was just
Now
going
let's
to
go
say,
back to the.
oh, go
Okay.
ahead. No, you go
No,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh,
I wanted to. I just wanted to get to the next questions because I have some coming in. So.
okay, I just wanted to say one of the things that we thought was cool was cooperating with other entities. Dreamforge does a lot of cooperation with Space and Time magazine, and we published an anthology working with them and with Uproar Books. And we've worked a little bit helping out a startup magazine that's overseas that's called Savage Planets, and just that idea of community helping one another, I think, is always a cool thing.
Yeah, that is really cool. Anybody else? Cool things? While we're waiting, Anne LeBlanc asks, do any of the panelists have thoughts about how to drive or increase readership for short fiction?
I think something has to do with making more things available online for certain periods. Like I've edited a handful of anthologies, and they're usually like a physical book involved or like ebooks, and like it is a bummer that just in order to get a hold of them, people have to like make the commitment to throw money at you. But also, I do need the money. But also, it's just when we see this, like especially like around awards buzz or things like that, and just like I know some people would like really love this story. It's the readership feels a lot higher for stories that are available for free online, and that gets back into that push and pull with how much do we pay for stories. I do think something of it is like how do we remove as many barriers as possible.
I think the answer for the last 15 to 20 years has been make it free, and that's actually created most of the problems we have and created most of the benefits we have. It's really it's been the best marketing, and it's been our own worst enemy. Um, because, yeah, like you said, we need the money to keep doing these things. Um, I think we have we have a really high number of people reading it right now. Um, uh, Making sure that our work is available in different mediums, because there's some people that only listen to their fiction, or that they only read in print or whatever. So making sure that it's available in a wide assortment is the best possible course at this time. Uh, and you know uh, my personal opinion is that the future of short fiction is actually international. Historically, we've looked like, I should paraphrase by saying this panel is really the state of short fiction in English language, predominantly American and maybe UK and Australia and Canada markets. That's the problem. We have to start thinking globally. We have to and embrace the larger community, and that's not just the authors; it's the readers too. And I think that's where we're going to see the most growth over the next 5 to 10 years.
And yeah, and that's the next question, I think, from Alexandra Seidel. With so many new and diverse writers coming in from everywhere, all around the planet, with all sorts of new ideas, how do you see the role of guest editors of diverse backgrounds?
I think that'll be very important, because I know without even defining it specifically that when we read stories, we have a certain specific approach to what it is we want to see in a story in terms of its structure and how the language is used and all that sort of thing. And we're not necessarily the best, or I'm not necessarily the best person anyway, to basically figure out whether that Chinese story or the Bulgarian translation or whatever it might be is actually something that is good, and because I'm bringing prejudices to it, if you want to put it that way. And I see this in my own first line readers. One of the things, for instance, that I just happen to do is I like occasionally to read Japanese translations, not in science fiction and fantasy, but just in literature. And so I've kind of gotten an internalized sense of the rhythm and all that. And we noticed we got a submission that was from someone in Japan that had been translated. And one of my first line readers basically came back and said, well, this is like terrible as far as the rhythm and the language use and all this kind of stuff. It's like we don't even think this person's first language is English. And when I looked at it, I said, oh yeah, this is just like the translations I read from Japanese literature. So I'm sure that there's a lot of things like that I will come our way that I will just in no way be qualified to judge whether it's real or not, or good or not. I'm using the wrong words, but just totally unqualified to deal with some of that stuff.
I really appreciated how like Apparition Lit has had like a handful of issues curated by really cool guest editors, and then like Faya had their Palestinian special issue with guest editors, and I think that's been an opportunity for folks who are doing well to like share the limelight a little bit, and like show sort of where some of the connections they want to make and who they want to be welcoming towards. And that's been powerful for me as a reader as well as an editor to see that work happening.
So I come at this from a slightly different angle. We haven't used any guest editors, and it's largely because I feel that I'm trying to broaden my skills, and that's one of the things I'm not seeing happening. When a publication brings in a guest editor, it's a one and done. It doesn't impact the magazine. It doesn't change things. So that's I would love to see these situations work where somebody brings a new perspective in, and then that sort of becomes part of who they are. Um, and that's one of the reasons why when we started doing translations, we said, okay, we think that being international is important. This is part of, we're going to make this who we are. We're going to incorporate this every month. And so I think that has a much better impact on the field when you commit to being part of that, embracing that thing rather than spotlighting and then running away from it. And I realize that's probably a bit harsh to say that they're running away from it. They're not. but it's great that these opportunities are happening. Historically, again, this is another one of those situations where historically it was an anthology thing, and what they're using is they're providing a platform for these opportunities. I just wish there were longer term things happening. So, some of these projects that are specifically magazines to deal with this demographic or this region or whatever, they're great because they're committing a long term. And I would love to see more of those happening, and have them succeed rather than
I know what you mean.
have isolated pockets.
I know what you mean, because you definitely see that thing where you're like, oh, we're good enough for the very special issue, but not for
Yes,
your
yeah.
regular issues, and then it creates a tension between what it means to be in the different kinds of issues, and that's
Yeah.
definitely a real criticism. Yeah.
And it can make it seem like the market was just paying lip service to an issue too. And it may and clearly they weren't. They were willing to give that up, but it turns into this negative thing. And you don't want to see that. You want to see bigger, longer term opportunities happening.
What do you all want to see more of this year? And I'm phrasing that in a very open way for a reason. What do you want to see more of this year in general? Whether it's in like a submission thing, whether it's like maybe more subscriptions, maybe it's more of a particular kind of motion forward in the industry. What do you want to see more of in this upcoming 2022?
One of my favorite things is stories that are written. I don't really have an elegant way of saying this yet, but stories that are written for like in groups versus out groups, and sort of where like a fly on the wall, as opposed to being handheld and brought through. Like I don't for like as opposed to like explaining a story for like outsider perspective. It's just like going all in, and like this is a story for like insider communities, and then for folks who are outside, they're just like they can piece it together or they don't, but that's not the focus of the story. Like I love it when that's that kind of story, that kind of work is given a position.
I like stories that where somebody's utopia, because a lot of the stories we get basically sometimes come across as screeds for that person's utopia. And I like stories where you realize that the utopia for this person is the dystopia for that person. That basically there's always going to be that kind of conflict, and we have to be able to find ways to live together and respect each other's visions of things. But that's what I would say.
This is one of those questions that I tend to fear
Sorry.
because if I said this is what I want, this is all I get. And then I wouldn't want it anymore. So I want to be surprised. How's that for a nice vague answer? Send me the story that you're really enjoying. Don't send me what you think I want. Challenge me.
All right. I think we only have like a minute left. So if yeah, it's 2:49. So if anyone has any last things to say or anything you really want to get off your chest, now's the time.
It's been a privilege being here. It's great to learn when you come to a panel.
It's great talking with y'all.
Likewise. I think we have a Discord channel if there are follow-up questions.
Yes, there is. If I don't know if there is a Discord channel. I don't know which
It's on
which one it is.
It's Spire.
It's the Spire. Yep, it's Spire.
It's on Spire. I don't know if are
I
you
have a
all going to head
screen.
over to the discount channel?
Yeah, I
Discord
have a
channel?
screen right here, and there's been a lot of activity there. So
Okay, awesome. So if you have any more questions, they might be available at the Spire right after this. We sign off here today. So thank you so much for coming by and talking about the state of short fiction and tackling some of those tough questions for
Moderating, Karen.
for 2021, where every question is a tough question. Gotta love 2020. Oh God, it's 2022 now, isn't it? Anyway, well, with that, everyone have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful evening, and keep up the good work.
And read more stories.
Read more stories. Yes,
And write
indeed.
them.
Okay.